Miguel, welcome aboard to the show. So happy to have you with us today.
Nice to meet you, Ari. It's a pleasure.
So first of all, I'll call out that you're calling from Spain, so it's quite late at night. So I appreciate you joining today.
Yeah. Well, it's almost 9:30 here, so no problem. It's late, but not that late.
Wonderful. I gotta ask, Miguel, what got you into cybersecurity? What was your origin story?
Well, it's a long story, actually. It started when I finished the university. Well, most of the people will study cybersecurity courses or programs when they were doing their university studies. That was not my case. Actually, in the university, I took like two courses, I think, related to cybersecurity. One was like system security, and the other one was like cryptographic stuff, but nothing really deep, actually. The career in the university was more focused in developing stuff. That was the trend at that moment. I am talking about like 15 years ago, maybe. But yeah, well, when I finished the university, I was like, I found a course related to ethical hacking, actually a kind of short to medium term program in an institute there in Peru. And well, I found it interesting because ethical hacking, it's not something that you will learn in the university, let's say, or something about you won't be able to find a lot of information about that easy. Um, nor in that time. So I found it interesting. I remember I talked with my parents at that moment because, well, I just finished the university. I was in an internship. It was my first job, so I didn't have enough money to be there to onboard me. So, well, they agreed, and well, I started that way. It was in 2013. At that moment, I was not working in cybersecurity, but it was, let's say, a life changer for me because I started to see IT and information systems in other way.
Mm.
It was funny because at the moment, well, I was the only one in the job talking about vulnerabilities and attacks and hacking stuff. And well, some of my managers well, they listen a bit, but well, they don't care a lot, at least at that moment. But yeah, well, that's the story. Then I have done a lot of studies after that. I was in the MIT also back into 2017. And well, in 2020, I moved here to Spain also to do a master degree in cybersecurity. And now I'm currently doing a cyber threat intelligence master also.
What was the moment that you kind of fell in love with cybersecurity? Do you remember anything very memorable?
Well, well, at that moment, I'm talking about 2013. I think it was the fact of be able to do something dangerous, let's say, within a control context.
Mm.
So ethical hacking is basically that, using the techniques from the attackers within a defined scope. And well, in order for people to do that, you need to know how exactly things work behind. So I think it was a mix of these both things because I'm a very analytic person, let's say. I like to know how things work behind the scenes. And yeah, if I cannot understand something or if I don't know how it works, well, I'm just to take a couple of hours, make a research, and well, uh, learn and then apply this knowledge. I think it's a kind of scientific mindset, let's say, something like that. I don't know.
I love that. So I want to talk about penetration testing. I have been vocal on this show that doing pen testing once a year
Mhm.
has little value, but there's a different approach that I think is intriguing. And what they really do in this approach where you've been involved in is you're really outsourcing the pen testing to a community, And then instead of paying maybe 20, 50, $100,000 to one pen tester organization, you're giving out these awards
Mhm.
to ethical hackers who are actually able to penetrate the system.
Mhm.
There's something brilliant about this because it's happening continuously as opposed to pen testing happening, once a year for your audit perspective. I wanted
Mhm.
to learn more about this. I love the concept. How do you even tap into a community if a company wanted to start their own kind of crowdsourced pen testing approach? How do you even go about thinking about that?
Well, at first, well, as you have mentioned, is well doing a pen test once per year. Right now, it doesn't make sense. Maybe several years ago, maybe it worked, but the reason why it is not it's not recommended to do that nowadays is because the exposure surface, it's constantly changing right now. And right now, well, we have a lot of systems or business processes that are supported by IT processes, by IT tools, IT technologies. Everything is connected. Everything is on internet. And the surface on internet, it's constantly changing. The technology is constantly changing. We are seeing now very complex attacks that are doing by leveraging artificial intelligence. So that's why in this constant changing environment, you need to make regular checks in a minor frequency, let's say. So because of that, well, several companies have done pen testing models, let's say, like the bug bounties program, or like said models of pen testing that allow the companies to perform continuous pen tests. When I say continuous, I mean 24/7 hours, 7 days per year, no holidays, no vacations. Obviously, we are talking about pen testers teams. Well, we are talking about teams of 400, 300 pen testers per company, let's say. Most of the time, and as far as I know, these kind of companies select people or invite people to join the bug bounty programs. They evaluate them, and well, they make a kind of ranking according to the experience of each pen tester. And also they classify the pen testers by their specialty, because there are a lot of different kind of attacks. So there are pen testers that are specialists in a specific attack, and it doesn't matter how complex it can be, they can break the system to get in. So yeah, it's a very very interesting model to do pen tests, and well, it's a benefit for organizations that want to have a continuous review of their systems. Basically, is that basically.
How do you, as an ethical hacker who's really trying to find vulnerabilities in order to help the organization be protected, how do you do so in a way that you don't create damage?
Yeah. Well, it is important in an ethical hacking perspective to have a defined scope. Also, sorry, well, it's important to have a defined scope. This scope should be reflected in the contract that should be signed by both parties. I mean, the organization that won the service and the company that is offering the service. And there are some kind of, well, it is called rules of engagement. Basically, we can call them as the rules of the game. You can establish in these rules what kind of attacks you can perform, what other attacks you are not able, and you are not allowed to do. The most common attack in this category is the negation of
Yes.
services, and well, you can define a lot of things inside these rules. So that makes the pen test it allows to do the pen test in a controlled environment or with a controlled scope, and it assures that there will be no damage to your systems or to the continuity of your operations.
Is there a risk because you're kind of putting certain types of attack out of
Mhm.
scope? Is there a risk that malicious hackers might use those type of attacks and you are vulnerable and you won't find it? And if so, what's the solution?
Yeah, it could be actually. For example, if you don't, well, there are two kind of tests. The traditional one in quality assurance stage
Yes.
in the development process. The most common testing is the functional testing, let's say. Just verify that everything it's doing every option is doing what they are supposed to do. But in the other hand, you have the security testing. But what a common thing between these two kind of tests, it's the stress testing. It is basically a kind of test where you send a lot of requests, for example, to a specific system or specific functionality inside the system, just to try to saturate the system and try to see how the system behaves in this situation. So basically, it's the same as a denial of service attack. And yeah, if you don't test that and someone try to do a denial of service to your system, there is a possibility that this system will not that will go down. But it's a risk. Yeah, I agree with that. But you need to consider also that there is a concept that it's called security in depth or deep security.
Talk us through that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Uh, well, security in depth basically is to apply different layers of security in different levels where and this make you or bring you the opportunity to block attacks in any of these layers. If the first layer fails, you can block the attack in the next one. If the second layer fails too, well, you can block the attack in the third layer, and so on. So that is basically security in depth, a group, let's say, of several controls defined to break the kill change of an attack. Actually, there is a interesting model that it's called the kill change attack that basically defines every stage that an attacker will do in order to perform an attack. So it is helpful for organizations that want to implement security in depth because you will know exactly what an attacker will do in each stage, and you can also define controls to or countermeasures for each of these stages.
What's really important about this, let's call it a philosophy, is really
Mhm,
you're modeling your redundant layers of protection based on
mhm.
attack mechanisms. So
Yes.
kind of think of it, our audience should think about it as if, you're thinking like a hacker in order to basically defend yourself. I think that's a really important concept, especially since a lot of our audience are not necessarily deep into the technical weeds. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Do you see organizations having complete test environments that are 100% mirrored to production in order to do more sensitive denial of service testing, or is that just too expensive to do nowadays?
Well, it is expensive to maintain actually, but yeah, I saw some organization that are compliant with this requirement. I say requirement because, well, there are a lot of standards and frameworks that recommend and request this, like ISO 27000 or the NIST or any other kind of frameworks that are being used. But yeah, it's hard to maintain. It's hard to implement, let's say, but it's something that it's crucial actually because you can perform pen tests or security tests in production environment, yes, but you need to be very careful. But there are other kind of specific use cases when you cannot do that. So you need to go to pre-production environments, and in order to get significant findings, I mean, findings that will reflect the reality in a production system. The pre-production environments have to be very aligned or very similar to the production.
Yeah. This is a very, very important point because I think what a lot of organizations do, they have a test environment, it kind of doesn't have data or it has garbage data in it, and it's not really identical to production. It's quite expensive to create a mirroring process that mirrors production. But once you do it, that's a really good asset to have. And I think
Yeah.
there's two advantages. One is, of course, on the security front. But one advantage that we don't talk about enough, I think, is that functional bugs that happen in production might not happen in your test environment if they're not completely mirrored. So I think it's a really important quality assurance technique that you're talking about, and that really isn't valued enough. I would love to see more companies doing it. And it's also fair to say another hack or another cheat. You don't have to have your test environment set up all the time, right? If you're doing your release of your software every 3 weeks or every 2 weeks, you can set it up for a day or two or three and shut it down later if you don't want to use it. So there's easy ways to basically automate this whole process so you're not really spending as much as you would spend if it was on all the time. So I appreciate those comments. Miguel, when you look at following up, so the community finds a vulnerability, you could need to speak to anybody in the organization, from a front-end developer to a database developer. How do you even figure out who's the right person to do? And then what do you do next? Like, how do you even engage a discussion with engineering?
Well, it's hard. It's something hard to do actually, because sometimes, well, I have worked in several organizations, and sometimes I saw that there is not a clear, let's say, structure for a functional extractor. Let's say. In other cases, there are some people that don't want to take the responsibility for the assets that they are responsible for. I remember a case back when I was back in Peru. Well, it was a manager that was responsible for several servers, let's say, and we got a finding that could impact on these servers, taking down the servers. And well, he answered us that, well, he won't apply any kind of fix, or he won't provide any kind of action plan, because for him, if the servers are offline because of an attack, well, for him, that's not a risk. So it's something funny because you don't expect that kind of answers. But yeah, it's the reality sometimes. Well,
What
as
was his
I
explanation? Was it about, oh, we can easily restore this, we can easily recover, downtime isn't very costly? Like, how did he justify that perspective?
he didn't give any explanation for that answer. It was just like that, and that's why I always remember that situation, because if you don't believe that's a risk for the operation, for the company, not only for you, because in the end, as I mentioned before, businesses are supported by IT processes, by IT technologies, by IT tools. So in the end, if IT fails, the business will fail too. And well, some people are not aware of that.
Yeah. This is actually a really important point, and I'll make an argument. Let's see if you agree.
Mhm.
For security engineers and engineers in general to have a good appreciation of how their tools actually support the business can
Mhm.
be an incredibly valuable in terms of prioritizing and understanding where to put their focus and their energy.
Well, actually, that is something that people should do, but it is hard to do. I mean, identify critical processes, business processes, and then classify them and try to realize what technologies are behind. It's something hard to do, mostly because, real case, the person who developed the system is not longer working with us, and
Nobody
there
knows
is
what it
no
does.
Yeah. And there is no documentation about this process. That was something that I saw frequently in the companies that
Yes.
I work for, but not that often. I think it's something that happened everywhere, actually.
No, absolutely. You know what one of the IT managers I worked with did? They're like, okay, we don't know whose this is. We don't know who owns it. We don't know what business process it is. We don't know what it's doing. They're like, okay, let's do an experiment. They shut it off. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
let's
and
turn the server off and see what
yeah,
happens. Lo and
if
behold, they had me
someone,
on the phone. They had me on the phone
yeah,
20
yeah,
minutes later. Like, nope, we need that. This is what it does.
yeah, sure. If someone complain, well, it is useful for someone. So yeah,
Yes, now we know who you are, basically, was their
yeah,
response. I gotta tell you, I was not happy with them at that moment, but I get it. I mean, I understand, especially if your vulnerability is affecting potentially the wider organization, if it's not
Mhm.
isolated, right? If it's giving you a, 0 day or anything like that. Miguel, what an absolute delight. I appreciate it. This is the art of going down the rabbit hole. We went down all kinds of rabbit holes today. I want to ask you one last question. If you had to go back to, 20-something-year-old Miguel, and this is a
Mhm.
difficult question, it's a personal one, what would your advice be to him?
Well, that's a hard one, actually.
There's not one person that we ask this question, and there's not like an audible thing like that. So, I'll give you a discount that this is a difficult question.
Yeah. Well, something that I will say to a younger me, it's that keep walking, keep doing the stuff that you believe. Stick to your convictions, let's say, to your ideas, to your ideals, and yeah, just keep walking, go further.
Follow your path. Miguel, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining the show today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you to you.